In 2019, a woman sat across from a psychologist and said one sentence that made the whole room go still. She said, "I spent 40 years making sure everyone in every room felt comfortable, and I just realized I never once asked if I was." Think about that. 40 years. Every room. Not once. The psychologist later said it was one of the clearest examples of self-erasure he had ever heard. But the most surprising part is not that this woman was wounded. It is what she had been building inside herself all that time without even knowing it. Because people who spend years reading the mood in a room, calming tension, tracking other people's emotions, and hiding their own are not simply surviving. They are being trained. Life itself is training them in a way no class, no book, and no workshop ever could. And what it trains into them is one of the rarest forms of intelligence a person can have. Most people will never develop it. Not because they are not smart, but because they never had to pay the cost that creates it. And yes, the cost is heavy. It is lonely. It is tiring. Sometimes it feels unfair. But stay with me, because this is where the story changes. What looked like weakness may have been preparation. What felt like damage may have also been development. And what you thought only took from you may have quietly given you something powerful. If you have ever felt too sensitive, too aware, too emotionally tuned in for your own good, this may change the way you see your whole past. Because maybe the pain was not only pain, maybe it was shaping you into someone who could read life at a depth most people never reach. There is a term in psychology called hypervigilant attunement. It sounds technical, but the experience is very human. It happens when someone grows up in an emotionally unstable environment, a place where the mood could change in seconds, where a parent's face had to be studied like a warning sign, where a shift in tone could mean the difference between peace and chaos. In those homes, children do something remarkable. They adapt fast. Their brains begin to notice tiny things other people miss. A tight jaw, a forced smile, a pause that lasts half a second too long, a kind word spoken with cold eyes. Their nervous system learns to read what is under the surface because reading the surface is not enough. That child becomes a scanner, a detector, an emotional radar before they even know the words for what they are doing. And the important part is this: that system does not vanish when childhood ends. It comes forward with them, into school, into friendships, into romance, into work, into every room they ever enter. That is why some people can walk into a space and feel the tension before anyone says a word. They notice the fake laugh, the hidden anger, the strange silence, the energy no one wants to name. And for a long time, it feels like a burden. It feels like too much, like a curse, like being forced to carry a signal no one else can hear. But do not miss this. That sensitivity did not appear by accident. It was built with purpose. It was shaped by pressure. And even if it once began as survival, it can later become one of the sharpest forms of human insight. When you live that way for years, early life can feel deeply confusing. You know something is off, but nobody says it. You sense dishonesty, but everyone keeps smiling. You feel the danger long before the facts arrive, and then you wonder if maybe you are the problem. That is the hard part. Not just seeing more, but doubting what you see, because other people either cannot or will not admit it. If you know that feeling, then you know the exhaustion of carrying perceptions you cannot always explain. You know the strange loneliness of being right too early. But here is the truth most people never hear. You are not broken. You are being shaped. The human brain is not passive. It responds to the world with brutal efficiency. If the world demands alertness, the brain learns alertness. If the world rewards careful reading of people, the brain becomes better and better at reading people. So a person who spent years inside emotional complexity does not come out empty-handed. They come out calibrated. They come out with a level of perception many people try to build later through therapy, reflection, books, and long years of painful mistakes. You learned it in real time, in real rooms, around real consequences. That matters a lot. The issue is not whether you have that ability. You do. The issue is whether you understand it yet. Because an ability you do not understand feels like suffering. An ability you do understand becomes power. And this is where things start to shift. The same sensitivity that once overwhelmed you can become clear seeing. The same awareness that once made you tired can become wisdom. But only when you stop treating it like a flaw and start learning what it is actually telling you. There is another idea that matters here, and it is called somatic intelligence. In simple words, it means your body remembers patterns even when your mind cannot explain them right away. Your nervous system has been collecting data since you were young. It remembers the feeling of being around someone who says the right things but feels unsafe. It remembers the difference between real warmth and performative kindness. It remembers pressure that hides behind charm, guilt dressed as love, control wrapped in concern. This kind of knowledge is not stored like a list in your head. It is stored as sensation. A tight chest, a sinking feeling, sudden calm, a quiet alarm, relief around one person, tension around another. That is not random. That is information. Most people are cut off from this completely. They live only from what sounds logical, what looks polished, what seems correct on the surface. That is why they are easier to deceive. Deception usually looks smooth at first. It speaks clearly. It smiles well. It presents itself neatly. But people who have lived through emotional complexity learn to read underneath the surface layer. They do not just hear words. They hear the gap between words and energy. They do not only watch behavior, they feel the motive behind it. When they are young, this can feel messy and intense. They sense too much and understand too little. They pick up on lies but second-guess themselves. They feel a relationship is wrong but keep explaining it away. That is perception without a framework. It is real, but it is not yet organized. An unorganized perception can be overwhelming. Still, that is not the final stage. With time, experience begins to sort the signals. What once felt like noise starts becoming meaning. That is when perception slowly becomes discernment. And that change matters more than most people realize. Perception is feeling that something is wrong. Discernment is knowing what is wrong, where it is, and why it matters. Perception absorbs. Discernment interprets. Perception reacts. Discernment understands. When you are younger, you may notice a pattern but not trust yourself enough to act on it. Then life keeps teaching. The relationship that confused you at 22 becomes easier to read at 30. The manipulation you excused once becomes obvious by the fifth time you see it. The red flag you ignored early becomes impossible to ignore later. Slowly, experience begins to organize instinct. And once that happens, you stop drowning in sensitivity and start working with it. This is where things get powerful. Because discernment is rare, very rare. It means you can hear the real message underneath the polite one. It means you can watch someone under pressure and learn more from that moment than from 100 pretty speeches. It means you can tell the difference between true regret and a performance designed to keep access to you. It means you can feel when support is actually control, when honesty is only partial truth, when affection is really attachment wearing a softer face. These are not small skills. These are life-shaping skills. They affect who you trust, who you love, who you work with, who you let close, and who you finally walk away from. And here is the hard truth. These skills are almost never learned in theory alone. They are earned through lived experience, through disappointment, through reflection, through repetition, through pain that taught you what words could not. So no, the pain was not meaningless. It may have been brutal, but it was not empty. In many ways, it was training. And now we come to something people rarely talk about. Everyone loves to speak about empaths as caring, deep, and sensitive. That is true, but it is not the whole story. There is another side that gets less attention. Strategic clarity. People who have been deeply hurt, repeatedly misread, and often underestimated can develop a kind of inner immunity. Not coldness, not bitterness. Immunity. That difference matters. Coldness closes the heart because it is afraid of being hurt again. Immunity keeps the heart open but stops the same tricks from working twice. Coldness says, I will feel nothing. Immunity says, I will feel fully, but I will not be fooled. And that is powerful, because the more life teaches you what is real and what is fake, the harder it becomes for manipulation to enter unnoticed. You are no longer easy territory. You are no longer the person who can be pulled in by charm alone, apology alone, intensity alone, or wounded stories alone. You start to recognize patterns before they complete themselves. And manipulators depend on confusion. They depend on your self-doubt. They depend on your hope that maybe this time the pattern means something different. Once you see clearly, you stop being useful to those people. That is why certain personalities lose interest when you become more grounded. Not because you turned harsh, but because you stopped being available for emotional extraction. Stay with me here because this part matters. When exploitative people lose access to you, your life begins to change in a quiet but dramatic way. The wrong people leave. The right ones remain. And what remains after that is quality. Real connection. Real safety. Real respect. Your world starts filtering itself once you become too clear to exploit. That is not a small shift. That is a complete change in how life meets you. But none of that becomes real until one interchange happens, and it may be the most costly change of all. You have to stop buying belonging with self-betrayal. That pattern is subtle. It does not always look dramatic. Usually it looks quiet. It looks like staying silent when something true needs to be said, because you already know honesty will make someone uncomfortable. It looks like nodding along while someone defines you in a way you know is false, because correcting them feels too exhausting. It looks like giving forgiveness before you have actually processed the hurt, just because forgiveness is easier for everyone else to handle than your pain. It looks like being endlessly available to people who somehow disappear when your need is real. It looks like making yourself smaller so someone else can stay comfortable in your presence. It looks like calling that kindness when in truth it is an old survival habit. This is one of the deepest wounds sensitive people carry. Not only what others did to them, but what they learned to do to themselves in response. And the turning point begins here. Not when the world suddenly understands you. Not when everyone finally apologizes. Not when life becomes perfectly fair. It begins the moment you decide that the full truth of who you are matters more than the approval of people who only like the reduced version. That moment is often quiet. It may not look dramatic from the outside. It often arrives after total exhaustion, not inspiration. After too many one-sided relationships. After too many rooms where you gave everything and still felt unseen. After too many attempts to save something that never felt safe in the first place. And when that shift happens, something in the body starts changing too. Psychology has a concept called vagal tone, and it has to do with how your nervous system moves between stress and calm. In simple terms, stronger vagal tone means you recover better. You come down from stress faster. You stay present in hard moments without flooding, freezing, or shutting down so quickly. And here is what matters. Research shows this can improve when a person leaves chronic stress behind and begins living in real safety. Not fake peace, not being tolerated inside dysfunction. Real safety, real consistency, real respect. That means healing is not just a nice metaphor. It is physical. Your body changes when you stop living in environments that drain and confuse you. Your baseline shifts. Your mind gets clearer. Your reactions get less extreme. Your feelings stop taking over every system inside you. You become calmer, not because you care less, but because your body is no longer trapped in constant defense. This is why some people seem almost different after years of inner work. Their face changes. Their voice changes. Their energy changes. They look more settled, more steady, more present, more real. It is not magic. It is biology catching up to truth. And this connects directly to power because a regulated person sees more clearly. A regulated person does not get pulled into every emotional storm. A regulated person can stay grounded while other people are acting from panic, ego, or performance. That creates a kind of presence you can feel in a room. It is quiet, but it is strong. It is not loud. It does not need to prove itself. And yet everyone feels it. Because calm that has been earned carries weight. Calm that comes after chaos carries authority. And when sensitivity is finally joined with steadiness, what emerges is not fragility. It is force under control. That is a very different thing. There is another phrase worth keeping close, the authority of integration. Integration means your thoughts, feelings, words, and actions all start pointing in the same direction. You know what you know. You feel what you feel. You say what you mean. You do what matches your values. That sounds simple, but most people do not live that way. They say they want honesty but hide important truths. They know a relationship is wrong but stay inside it. They feel disrespected but keep accepting more of it. They say they value peace while living in constant self-abandonment. That inner contradiction drains people. It weakens their presence. Even when others cannot explain it, they can feel it. They sense that something is off. Something does not line up. Something feels performed. What they are noticing is incongruence, the gap between what a person presents and what they are actually living. Now think about the opposite. Think about someone who stops splitting themselves in pieces. Someone who stops saying yes when their whole body means no. Someone who stops explaining away what they clearly see. Someone who leaves what they know is wrong, speaks what they know is true, and stops translating themselves for people committed to misunderstanding them. Their whole presence changes. There is a steadiness there, a gravity, a grounded quality that says more than words ever could. This is what makes some people feel trustworthy the second they walk into a room. They are not trying to appear solid. They are solid. They are not performing truth. They are standing in it. That is the authority of integration. It is compelling because it is rare. In a world full of masks, congruence feels almost electric. And people respond to it even if they cannot explain why. They trust it. They feel safer around it. They listen when it speaks. This is also where earned authority begins to show itself. Not authority from title. Not authority from status, money, rank, or credentials. Those things can matter, but they are not the deepest form of authority. Earned authority comes from lived truth. It comes from someone who has gone through something real, reflected on it honestly, and come out with understanding that cannot be copied. Human beings are built to sense this. Deep down, our nervous systems are always reading for congruence. We want to know if the outer person matches the inner one. Because in every age of human life, following the wrong person has a cost. So we developed a quiet detector for what feels true and what feels constructed. And when someone is deeply integrated, when what they feel and what they live finally match, people notice. They may call it wisdom. They may call it presence. They may say, I don't know what it is, but I trust this person. What they are really noticing is the absence of performance. That absence is powerful, especially now in a world where so much of life is edited, branded, curated, and sold back as identity. Realness stands out. Precision stands out. A person whose words carry the weight of actual lived experience stands out. That is why the strongest person in a room is not always the loudest one. Often, it is the quiet one whose words are exact, whose attention is stable, whose energy is not scattered, whose truth does not wobble every time the room changes temperature. That kind of person can shift an entire conversation without raising their voice. Not because they are trying to control the room, but because truth carries its own force. And people feel that force. They lean toward it, they trust it, they remember it. That is the kind of influence pain can produce when it has been turned into clarity instead of bitterness. Now, here is the part many people miss. This transformation does not happen just because time passes. Time alone does not heal confusion. Time alone does not turn sensitivity into wisdom. A decade can pass, and a person can still be trapped in the same old patterns if they never stop and face what those patterns are doing. Change begins when you stop waiting for the outside world to approve your worth before you act like you have it. That is the real turning point. For some, it comes through one conversation that suddenly breaks the spell. For others, it arrives in a quiet moment alone, maybe in the morning, maybe after one disappointment too many, when something inside finally says, I am done negotiating my existence with people who never truly saw me. However it comes, the move is the same. You choose your own perception over the group agreement of people who benefited from your doubt. That is not selfish. That is liberation, because self-doubt is often not accidental. It is trained. It grows inside relationships and environments where you had to question your own instincts in order to stay connected, stay safe, or stay accepted. So when you stop doing that, something major happens. You trust the signal you feel before your mind has fully explained it. You stop rewriting your experience into softer language so others can dismiss it more easily. You stop shrinking your truth to protect people who were comfortable only with the edited version of you. And when that happens, you become undeniable to yourself. That comes first. Not to the room, not to the world, to yourself. And once that happens, outside control starts losing its power. Because outside control only works when inside cooperation still exists. It needs your self-doubt. It needs your hesitation. It needs your willingness to betray yourself for peace. Once that ends, the structure begins to collapse. And the collapse does not always look dramatic. It often happens through clarity, not conflict. You simply stop giving your energy to what asks you to disappear. You stop accepting definitions of yourself that were built by people who needed you small. You stop offering endless explanations to those committed to misunderstanding you. And suddenly, the same tactics that once worked on you no longer land. The guilt does not pull you in the same way. The charm does not blur your vision. The pressure does not create automatic obedience. You see it, you name it, you remain steady. That steadiness changes everything. This is where the final stage starts to form. Not in vulnerability, not numbness, not the absence of feeling. It is something stronger than all of those. It is ownership. Complete ownership of your feelings, your perception, your choices, and your limits. From the outside, it can look simple. It can look like a person who just knows who they are. But what makes that so rare is what it took to get there. Most people are shaped by their pain. Many remain ruled by it. Some begin to understand it. But a few do something different. They transform it. They take the same sensitivity that once made life heavier and turn it into discernment. They take compassion that was once exploited and aim it with care, not waste. They take the pain that was meant to reduce them and turn it into understanding no one can steal. This is where true depth appears. Not dramatic depth, quiet depth. The kind that can read people well, choose slowly, love honestly, and leave cleanly. The kind that does not need to announce itself because it is already built into the way the person stands, speaks, listens, and decides. If you have ever met someone like that, you know the feeling. They do not push their power. They carry it, and maybe that is the clearest way to say all of this. The deepest power of an empath is not that they feel more. It is that after enough reflection and enough truth, they learn what to do with what they feel. They stop wasting insight on people who only want access. They stop calling self-erasure love. They stop calling overgiving virtue when it is really fear. They stop treating their own inner signals like small suggestions and start treating them like valuable information. That is a huge change. Because once sensitivity joins wisdom, once compassion joins boundaries, once perception joins courage, the whole person changes. Their attention gets cleaner. Their words get sharper. Their presence gets steadier. Their life gets simpler in the best way because they are no longer spending half their energy arguing against what they already know. And that creates something rare, real presence. Presence rooted in truth. Presence that does not come from image, performance, or trying to impress. Presence that comes from having faced enough of life to stop pretending. So here's the real question. The pain happened. The years happened. The betrayals happened. The confusion, the people-pleasing, the rebuilding, the deep tiredness that comes from carrying too much for too long, all of it happened. You already paid the cost. That part is done. The only question left is whether you are going to collect what that pain purchased. Will you keep calling your depth a flaw, or will you finally see it as training? Will you keep shrinking so others stay comfortable, or will you stand in the full weight of what you know? And if this is speaking directly to something in you, do not scroll past that feeling. Hold it. Because maybe your life was not only breaking you down, maybe it was building a kind of vision, calm, and authority that only time, truth, and survival can create. And if so, then later in life is not when your power begins. It is when you finally recognize that it was there all along.